As I mentioned, fears of a spillover of the Israel-Hamas war, it continues to loom all over the West Asian region. Shivan has all the details. Over to you, Shivan.
Him, those are fears which have been looming ever since this conflict started, but now we are almost seeing it happen. We're going to get you all the details next. As Israel orders an unprecedented evacuation of northern Gaza ahead of its ground offensive, concerns mount over the risk of a regional spillover from the conflict between Israel and Hamas. US forces too are facing increased threats here, raising concerns that the Israel-Hamas war may spiral across West Asia, involving countries like Lebanon, Syria and Yemen, to just start naming a few. Now, the signs of escalation in West Asia might already be visible. Let's take you one by one. Let's first show you the battlefronts that are already active. Here is the map. You see Israel over there. There is the West Bank, there is Gaza, there is Lebanon, and of course there is Syria right there. This is what it looks like. Now, first, let's start off with the Gaza Strip and West Bank. These are the two regions that you will be first focusing on. Israeli forces are fighting with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and in the latest, Israel bombarded Gaza with multiple airstrikes. Health authorities in Gaza said that at least 4,600 people killed in Israel's two-week bombardment that began after Hamas' October 7th rampage on southern Israeli communities. Now, this is also where Hamas militants are keeping the hostages. Then there is the West Bank, which you see right here. That's a close-up for you. This is the other front, where just a day ago, Israeli aircraft struck a compound beneath the Al-Ansar mosque in the Jenin refugee camp. Now, this is the second Israeli airstrike in recent days to hit the West Bank. Now, the other front of the war. Let's head over to Lebanon. It lies towards the north of Israel, and that is where the other front of the war has already started. Now, this is with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Iran-backed militia, which is based in Lebanon, and its fighters are attacking Israel from the north. Ever since Israel-Hamas war broke out earlier this month, Israel has already enhanced its evacuation efforts along the northern borders with Lebanon. And now you know why. In the latest, Israeli aircraft claim to have struck two Hezbollah cells in Lebanon. Israel says that they were planning to launch anti-tank missiles and rockets towards Israel. Hezbollah has vast stocks of long-range missiles which could strike almost anywhere in Israel. Hezbollah is far more military-backed than Hamas. Hezbollah's entry into the war, however, could unleash direct Israeli strikes, and that can definitely spiral the situation out of control, not just against Lebanon, but also against Iran, because Hezbollah, which is based in Lebanon, is directly backed by Iran. That's how Iran gets involved. Now, Israel has issued a warning to the Iran-backed group already. An IDF spokesperson, Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson, said that Hezbollah is playing a very dangerous game. He added that Hezbollah's actions could drag Lebanon into a war with no gains. Now, let's take a look at the other nation which is also within the region and can get involved. We're talking about Syria, which is towards the northeast of Israel. Heading over here, this is the main regional backer. Iran has a military presence here. Israeli missiles hit Damascus and Aleppo international airports, putting both out of service and killing two workers as well. Iran has long supported rebel groups in Syria, where Israel and the US are also engaged in the long civil war over there. Now, talking about US and Syria, let's now head over to Yemen. Yemen is the next nation which is in the region. In the south, another Iran-backed group in Yemen has been troubling Israel. A US Navy warship traveling near Yemen intercepted 3 missiles above the northern Red Sea and several drones that were launched by what US said was the Iran-aligned Houthi movement, and they function with the Houthi rebels. Now, it is believed that they fired 3 missiles which are heading towards Israel, and US intercepted them. Now, the missiles were heading north, and US says they may have been aimed at Israel. Houthis have expressed support for the Palestinians and threatened Israel. They claim to possess a liquid propellant missile known as Tufan, which reportedly has the capability to strike anywhere within Israel. A similar threat that Israel has faced from Lebanon as well, that they can strike anywhere in Israel. Now, in the very latest, the Israeli military said that one of its tanks had accidentally fired and hit an Egyptian post. And that brings Egypt into this entire fold as well. An Egyptian post was struck near the border with Gaza. The Egyptian military said the blast had caused minor injuries but did not give details. Now, the Egyptian army said Israel had immediately expressed its regret over the unintentional incident, and an investigation is, of course, underway. Most importantly, this is also where the humanitarian aid is coming in from, which the US president had visited Israel for. All right, there is a lot to discuss, of course. We are seeing a multi-pronged war which is on the brink of happening. To discuss things further, we are now being joined by Edward P. Joseph, live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Joseph is a political analyst and a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Welcome to the broadcast, sir. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
You know, the first and most obvious questions, how long do you feel Israel can continue battling on all fronts? And there are threats which are continuously coming in. How long will this continue?
Well, the Israelis seem to be fairly confident about their ability to sustain the operations that they need to. In terms of the actual fronts, the most likely activity, of course, would be in Gaza. And we should remember here, put everything in perspective for your viewers, that this war began 2 weeks ago when Hamas launched it. It's very important to keep that in mind. This is a war Israel did not want. It suffered, as your report accurately mentioned, a mass terror attack on October 7th, just 2 weeks ago. And already people have forgotten about those graphic, gruesome details about, for example, intentional killing of babies, of infants, the slaughter of some 250 young people at a concert. That's what propelled this. This is a mass terror attack that for Israel, compared to its population, those civilian casualties are staggering. Some 1,400 Israelis were killed. So that's the context here for this. This is a war that Hamas launched, and that's the focus in Gaza, going after Hamas, not intentionally going after Palestinian civilians, although they are caught in the middle of this and, of course, suffer from the blockade on Gaza. Absolutely true. Now, when we come to potential expansion, the first place we look is not Syria and, of course, not Yemen, but we look first towards Lebanon and Hezbollah, which, as your report also accurately mentioned, is under total Iranian support and, if not, direct operational control. Now, for Hezbollah, it's not so simple. It's not just a simple matter of Hezbollah saying, oh, well, we'll take advantage of this opportunity while Israel is deploying troops and potentially on the ground in Gaza. Well, for Hezbollah, there are risks there. Hezbollah has its hands full within Lebanon itself. Lebanon is in a severe state of division, and Hezbollah is locked into tension and conflict with its counterparts within Lebanon itself. So it is not risk-free for Lebanon to simply mount an operation against Israel. And there may be disputes and differences between Iran and Hezbollah about whether or not it wants to engage with Israel. But at this point, again, Israel seems to be confident about its ability to handle.
Israel seems confident that they can continue for as long as this is what essentially you mentioned.
Professor, also, let's talk about the role of the international community as well, with the United States, China positioning military assets in the region. Do you feel that such a flex of muscle, it can act as any sort of a deterrent at this point?
I think that was entirely the intention. Immediately, President Biden has moved swiftly. You know, all of this talk about President Biden being too old and so forth, this has all disappeared. They've seen him be a vigorous hands-on commander-in-chief. The United States immediately moved 2 aircraft carriers into the waters nearby as a strong deterrent signal. President Biden himself, of course, made that dramatic visit to Israel. This was in the midst, of course, of what appears to be, based on what U.S. intelligence, and also I should mention here, French intelligence, says was a bogus claim by Hamas that Israel struck the hospital in Gaza City on October 17th, causing, according to Hamas, hundreds of casualties. A terrible event for those Palestinian civilians there. But Hamas has not been able to provide any evidence, refuses to. It's been asked by media outlets in the United States and cannot. And meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal has put together a video showing that very likely that strike on that deadly strike on that missile that killed terribly some hundreds or more Palestinian civilians was due to a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that misfired and struck the parking lot. So that's where that issue stands. Please,
Mr. Joseph, I just want to now, just take this a little further. We talk about Hamas, we talked about Hezbollah, we mentioned about the Houthi rebels. Now, they all have links to Iran. My question is, who is backing Iran that they are funding all these militias who are essentially targeting Israel as of now? But who is standing behind Iran? Or is it Iran, do they have the resources to carry out this multi-pronged war through its proxies?
It's a great question that you ask, because it takes us exactly to Iran's priorities. Iran's priorities are not its citizens. We've seen that. We've seen that graphically, where Iran's citizens rise up in protest against Iran, and they're killed by Iran. So Iran doesn't care about the welfare of its citizens. It continues to work on its nuclear weapons program. The Biden administration wanted to get back into the nuclear weapons deal, lift the sanctions, and Iran refused to accept the deal on that, to restore and return to the Iran nuclear deal. Instead, Iran wants to make and project this destabilization in the region. That is the primary focus. This is a regime that is determined to destabilize, to create havoc, to kill people. You know, you mentioned Syria. We should. It's very important for your viewers to put this conflict in Gaza in perspective. Gaza has about a little over 2 million citizens. In Syria, neighboring Syria, with Iranian support, get this, 6 times the population of Gaza have been displaced. 6 times, about 14 million Syrians have been displaced by the war there, launched by Bashar Assad with the full backing of Iran. The death toll in Syria, over 300,000. That's according to conservative UN estimates. Over 300,000. So this dwarfs what we've seen here in this 2 weeks. Of course, the scrutiny, international scrutiny on Israel, of course, far outmatches anything that was applied to Bashar Assad and Iran in Syria. Please.
Well, Mr. Edward P. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights and your perspective on this.
You're welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.